There comes a moment in life that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. No shouting, no tears in public, no final argument, just a quiet sentence you say to yourself, no more. No more explaining yourself. No more shrinking to fit places that hurt. No more abandoning yourself just to keep the peace. And what awakens after that moment is a form of self-love most people never experience. The breaking point where you stop abandoning yourself for most of your life. You didn't realize you were slowly disappearing, not physically, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually. You were present, yet absent from yourself. You showed up for others. You carried emotional weight that wasn't yours. You tolerated things that quietly chipped away at your peace. And you did it because you believed that was what love required. You were taught, directly or indirectly, that being a good person meant being patient, understanding, and endlessly forgiving, that your role was to endure, to adapt, to be strong, so you learned how to survive discomfort. You learned how to silence your needs. You learned how to explain away pain. You learned how to convince yourself that things weren't that bad. And maybe they weren't at first, but over time something began to happen inside you. A deep tiredness appeared, not the kind sleep could fix, not the kind rest could heal, a tiredness that came from constantly overriding your inner voice. Every time your body said this doesn't feel right, you ignored it. Every time your intuition warned you, you pushed it aside. Every time you felt hurt, you minimized it, until one day you reached a point where continuing felt heavier than stopping. That's the real breaking point. Not drama, not collapse, but awareness. Awareness that staying the same is costing you yourself. This is where the phrase "no more" is born, not from anger but from exhaustion, not from hatred but from clarity. You suddenly see the pattern, how often you give more than you receive, how often you explain yourself to people who don't listen, how often you compromise your peace to avoid discomfort, and for the first time, instead of blaming others, you see the truth. You were the one abandoning yourself. And that realization hurts, but it also frees you, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Saying no more is terrifying because it challenges everything you were conditioned to believe. You were taught that boundaries are selfish, that prioritizing yourself is rude, that walking away means failure. So when you finally stop, guilt rushes in. You question yourself. You doubt your feelings. You wonder if you're overreacting. But here's the truth most people never hear. Guilt doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're breaking an old survival pattern. Your nervous system learned safety through overgiving. So choosing yourself feels unfamiliar, almost dangerous, but your body knows the truth. That's why when you finally say no more, something inside you exhales. Your chest feels lighter, your thoughts slow down, your body relaxes in ways it hasn't in years. This is the moment self-respect begins, not confidence, not arrogance, respect. You start teaching yourself a new rule. I will not hurt myself to keep others comfortable. And once that rule is set, nothing is ever the same again. The quiet awakening of self, love that no one talks about, the self, love that awakens after no more, doesn't arrive with fireworks, it arrives quietly. You don't suddenly feel happy all the time. You don't feel powerful every day. You don't feel fearless. What you feel is steady. You notice changes in how you respond to the world. Things that once triggered you no longer pull the same reaction. You pause, you breathe, you observe, not because you're detached, but because you're grounded. You stop reacting from wounds and start responding from awareness. This is one of the first signs real self-love has awakened. You no longer need to prove your pain is valid. You no longer need others to understand your choices. You no longer need permission to protect your peace. Your energy becomes selective. You stop engaging in conversations that go nowhere. You stop explaining boundaries to people who benefit from crossing them. You stop chasing clarity from those who thrive on confusion, and surprisingly, you don't feel empty. You feel relieved, because so much of your exhaustion came from emotional overextension. You are everywhere except with yourself. Now you come home. You choose rest without guilt. You choose solitude without loneliness. You choose distance without anger. And yes, this stage can feel lonely. You may outgrow people, you may outgrow environments, you may outgrow versions of yourself, but this loneliness is different. It doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like alignment. You realize how many connections were built on you tolerating less than you deserved. And instead of trying to fix it, you let it go. Love at this stage doesn't seek attention. It doesn't announce boundaries. It doesn't argue. It simply withdraws energy from what feels wrong. And that's powerful. You also stop seeking validation the way you used to. Compliments feel nice, but unnecessary. Approval feels optional, not essential, because you are no longer outsourcing your worth. You begin trusting yourself. Your body, your intuition, your emotional signals, and this trust creates a calm that nothing external can give you. This is the stage where you realize peace is not boring, it's unfamiliar, and once you get used to it, you'll never choose chaos again. The version of you that exists after no more, the version of you that emerges after no more, doesn't try to convince anyone of anything. They don't chase, they don't beg, they don't negotiate their worth. They move slowly, intentionally, deliberately. They understand that peace is a responsibility. They leave situations early not because they fear conflict, but because they respect their energy. They no longer confuse chaos with passion. They no longer confuse attachment with love. They no longer confuse effort with value. Their intuition becomes sharp because it's no longer ignored. They feel misalignment immediately. They recognize patterns quickly. They listen to discomfort instead of suppressing it. They don't need to be understood by everyone. They don't need approval to walk away. They don't need validation to choose themselves. People may say you've changed. And they're right. You're no longer available for emotional labor that costs you your peace. You're no longer accessible to disrespect. You're no longer willing to shrink. And the biggest shift of all, you stop waiting to be chosen. Because you already chose yourself, this is the self-love that awakens after no more. And not loud, not dramatic, not performative, but unbreakable. The moment you said no more to what was draining you was the moment you finally said yes to yourself. And that decision changes everything.